What if I told you there's a new phone that packs flagship level features, a multi-day battery, and has a super vibrant display? Well, that's where the Redmi Note 15 Pro Plus comes in. Now, is it all just spec, or is there more substance here that makes this the best mid-range flagship you can buy right now? Let's find out. The Redmi Note 15 Pro Plus is powered by the Snapdragon 7S Gen 4. Now, this is a very mild upgrade compared to the 7S Gen 3 found in the 14 Pro Plus, which is a bit of a disappointment, to say the least. But when it comes to things like gaming on Call of Duty Mobile, you do still get quite a lot of the performance benefits because this is running on very high graphics and max FPS. Now, there's two modes here. If you run this in balanced mode, you'll get roughly 35 frames per second, and it runs very, very well. If you push this into performance mode, you hit around about 50-ish or 40 or so-ish frames per second. But the latter mode does obviously tax the CPU and the GPU. But the performance as a whole, in general, is very, very good. You get no issues at all with any graphics or any low latency moments, and everything looks really, really good. No drop frame rates, graphics are super punchy and vibrant. They look really, really good, and you can get a really great performance here if you are someone who does a lot of gaming. And as a part of that, if you are a big gamer, some of the spec we want to touch on is on the rear of this phone, and that's in its battery, because this Redmi Note 15 Pro Plus has a 7,000 milliamp hour battery that uses silicon carbon tech, will actually recharge at 90 watts wired, which is sick, and also can act as a power bank, which is 22.5 watts in terms of the speed it offers. So those specs are absolutely insane. One thing to note on that incredible battery performance is there is no wireless charging, and that 7,000 milliamp hour likely will not see it out of China. This is a Chinese import spec, so you're not as likely going to see that globally. You probably get around about 6,000 milliamp hours with still the 90 watts of wired charging, which is still very, very good, and that's silicon carbon tech. But in the real world terms, the application for that battery is, well, in one area is best to test it, and that's using 3D Mark's Wildlife Extreme Test, which is a benchmark that runs 20 cycles over 20 minutes. Now, some really techie, nerdy stuff here, so do apologize, but it gives you some context, is stability stays at 99.6%, which essentially means there is almost no throttling on the CPU on the 15 Pro Plus, which is pretty sick. Now, the other really impressive component is those 20 cycles took only 5% of battery usage, which is amazing, and temperature only increased from 23 degrees to 36 degrees, which is actually sick, because roughly anything above 40 odd, you probably feel it. Below that, you're not going to feel it. And the impressive component here is we've actually run the Snapdragon 8 Elite on the Honor V5 we recently reviewed. That hit over 50 degrees on the exact same test. So that gives you an idea, and also makes you wonder that this package, which is roughly 6.83 inches in size, houses a massive 7,000 milliamp hour battery, and does question why brands like Google, Apple, and Samsung are only just now offering batteries slightly above the 5,000 milliamp hours. So raw performance of the 7S Gen 4 is great for things like battery performance and battery and thermal management, as well as gaming. But when it comes to running OS, Android 15 HyperOS 2.0, this will get HyperOS 3.0 as well, which is awesome, runs really, really well. And a quick overview, mainly on the AI functionality here, you get a couple of really great features. AI Eraser, as you'd expect, AI Expand, and AI Sky are all of the three main gallery features. There are a few other things here like cutout and bokeh as well, just to name a few. And voice to text as well on the AI front in terms of working in notes also works very, very well. The AI features are pretty rich on here. What you don't get is AI summary in the Notes app. It is limited, but again, a provision. As this is a China-only spec in this particular model we've got here, you might not get the full suite of AI features. Generally then, around the OS, navigating around it, using it, going from the settings to the main menu, multi-window, opening and closing apps, all that works super, super smooth. 120 Hz response rate as well, so it's super smooth experience when it comes to its OS, with some limitations on its AI functionality. Sticking to focus on the back, and that is this massive camera lens on the rear, which houses a triple camera array and is no different in terms of its look and style as the 14 Pro Plus. But what you do get here spec-wise is a 50 megapixel wide with OIS, 50 megapixel telephoto, and an 8 megapixel ultra wide on the back of those three lenses, which are exactly the same verbatim to the 14 Pro Plus. So there is no real world performance improvements here in terms of spec. But in real world terms, what do they look like, those photos? Well, for the main lens, you get really good lighting. Main sensor produces some really nice, well-balanced shots with a good amount of detail. Images can be a bit overly contrasty, but that's to be expected with fairly good dynamic range. The telephoto is actually a 2.5x optical telephoto, and the image you get here uses a lot of AI for refinement, but does actually a really good job, especially at the top end of the zoom left, which, to be fair, did surprise me quite a lot. The colors, again, are well balanced, full of detail, and they may lack that extra punch and contrasty image colors of the main lens. They still do a very good job. The biggest failing here, unfortunately, is that 8 megapixel ultra wide, because it lacks the detail, especially when you're going from the main to telephoto to the ultra wide. You don't get that same punchy quality, and sometimes you can get a lot of sort of muddiness, let's just call it, around the edges where the detail just isn't there. It just looks flat and kind of almost unusable. So stay away from the ultra wide. The video 4K up to 30 FPS. The ultra wide only goes to 1080p, which is a downside again. But that video is pretty decent, reasonably good quality. There's a well balanced in terms of colors. It is in no way cinematic. It's nowhere near things like an iPhone or Samsung or a Google device, but still does a relatively decent job. The design profile of the 15 Pro Plus is almost exactly the same as what you had on the 14 Pro Plus, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And now we're going to drop some crazy amount of spec on you. We'll put some text on screen to help. You get a 6.83 inch AMOLED display with 120 Hz, 3200 nits of peak brightness, with 3840 Hz of PWM dimming, an 86% screen to body ratio, with a 1.5K resolution. Thank you for listening to that bit. So how does it actually look in the real world terms in terms of watching content down here? Well, you actually get great quality because it is an AMOLED display. So those blacks look super black, and then the display pops the colors. Now the 1.5K resolution is benefiting here, and it supports the long-term usage of the battery as well. So that's the reason for the 1.5K resolution, and it looks really, really good. The display itself actually is larger than the 14 Pro Plus, which is a plus point, double plus there, funny enough. But overall, watching content on here is a very, very good experience. And then let's talk slightly about IP rating. IP68 and IP69K rated is the 15 Pro Plus, and it's actually super durable. It actually has Xiaomi's Dragon Crystal Glass on the front as well to protect it, and then you get IP60 and 69, so it's really good for things like pressure washing, water resistance, etc. So all very good, and actually does feel in this frosted back color like a really well built device. So is the 15 Pro Plus the mid-range king? Well, price wise, it sits way below the normal 450 to 650-ish price tag that a mid-range phone sits in. It's this, when it comes into the UK and all its global markets, or probably roughly around $399, which is pretty good value for money. And then let's talk about some of the plus points of this phone. You get a really, really good dual 50 megapixel sensors, which is a telephoto and the main, are very, very good for photo and video. Charging and battery life, again, incredible. And then obviously the biggest selling point of this phone will be its overall performance combined with the lack of throttling, which is great. There are some downsides here though. There's no real change when it comes to the design profile. It hasn't really changed. The CPU does perform well, but isn't a massive upgrade that you'd expect year on year. And then this particular phone also has the option of satellite connectivity that will not be available here in the UK and globally, as will that 7,000 milliamp hour battery. Both those are likely to be China exclusive. But those are just some of the small bits. I think the biggest thing is if you've got a 14 Pro Plus or a 14 series phone in the Note series, I probably wouldn't bother upgrading to this. The upgrade is very, very minor as a whole. But if you're in the market to say you spend around that £400 here in the UK, then something like the 15 Pro Plus would be a very, very good buy, or if you're upgrading from an older device. So factor that into your decision when this does become available globally, whether you have an existing phone and how much you want the upgrade to be meaningful when you move forward. But let us know in the comment section your thoughts on the 15 Pro Plus and its comparison to the 14 Pro Plus. And if you're looking to upgrade in that mid-range, would you buy something like this? Let us know in the comment section. And whilst you're there, be sure to like and subscribe. Until the next one, we out.